to give this talk with zero preparation, but last night I had insomnia, so I gave a little thought to the speech that I'm supposed to give next week. And so it's a bit rough, but this is what it's going to be about. This is my third speech. It's supposed to be getting to the point, so it stresses organization. The topic of my speech is tips on choosing a photographer. As some of you know, I work at Cisco and I'm an IT engineer, but I'm also a professional photographer, and that's why I lug around this heavy camera that you see at the back every week. I photograph small smachot, like britot and bar bat mitzvahs, that sort of thing. And last year I married off my son, so I do have experience with wedding photography. So I want to give you a few tips on choosing a photographer. And B'ezrat Hashem, some of you who are unmarried will get married and you'll need to choose a photographer someday. Or some of you who are already married have kids who will be getting married or who will have bar bat mitzvahs, that sort of thing. These tips will apply less to you because for bar and bat mitzvah, you're not dropping so much money. You're talking about a few hundred shekels, and it's not a matter of life or death. Most photographers can handle a bar bat mitzvah, brit milah. But a wedding, that's serious money. You have to be able to please the couple and both sets of parents. So, what can I tell you about choosing a photographer? First of all, should you choose a photographer? Well, yes, I think so. And that's not only to keep people like me and my friends in business. It's because remember that these are your heirlooms. What you're going to pass on in 20, 30, 40 years are the photographs from the wedding. Long after the band is forgotten, you will have those photographs. And please let them be decent, not just something taken with your Uncle Harry's Instamatic or everybody's iPhone. The second reason is that you need somebody who knows what they're doing. And while it's true that you can save a lot of money by using a friend or a relative, it's really better to use a professional. First of all, a professional can let everybody else relax, because if you're using a friend or relative, they're not really a guest at your sim club. They're actually working, and it really is hard work to take decent pictures. You might not realize it, but you have to run around a lot. A friend or relative isn't likely to know both sides of the family if it's a wedding, and so they have a tendency to sort of like schmooze with their friends, take pictures of their friends, talk to their relatives, take more pictures of their relatives, and completely ignore the rest of the family. That does happen. Another thing is, if something goes wrong, a professional will know how to deal with it. Like, for example, suppose there's a power failure, and the only source of light is everybody's mobile phone held up under the chuppah. A professional can deal with that. An amateur doesn't have a prayer unless they're really, really good. Or suppose some kid throws up a glass of petal on the bride's dress just before she's going to reach the chuppah. First of all, that's a very heavy Photoshop deal, and a trained photographer can do that. But a photographer can also do the poses, arrange a flower girl artfully in front of the bride's skirt, and simply catch the horror-stricken faces of the guests when this incident happens. You know, a photographer knows how to deal with the unexpected. That's another reason that you're hiring a professional. Now, what about price? Wedding photographers are expensive, and you tend to get what you pay for. I really don't recommend that you go for a bargain photographer. Let me tell you a horror story. A friend of mine, she got married in her late 40s. It was her second wedding at Ramat Rachel in August at the middle of the afternoon. Blazing, blazing hot sun. They hired a $200 photographer, a guy who showed up with no equipment except 2 cameras hung around his neck. And so she was photographed, an older woman under this very hot sun. She looked like Clint Eastwood. I mean, wrinkles everywhere. If a bride does not look gorgeous on her wedding day, you've got a really unhappy bride. And those are photos that instead of hanging them proudly on her wall, she's going to hide for the rest of her life. So that's another reason that you should get someone who knows what they're doing, but not someone at the bottom of the feeding scale. Unless possibly you know someone who's said to be a really, really gifted beginner who's just trying to break into the market. Okay, that's a slightly different case, but then you still have to be careful. Now, what about the high end? Does that necessarily mean you're going to get a better photographer? Well, also not necessarily. I've seen very expensive, trendy photographers. In fact, the same woman, her daughter got married. I sort of clipped my way through to her daughter's album, and they had an atrociously expensive photographer. And I saw one photo in which the young couple was posed in a doorway in Yemim Moshe with a photographer's shadow right across the bride, like this. You could see the strap dangling down. And I thought, hey dude, if you just turn a little bit, I can see what kind of lens you've got in your camera. I mean, that should not even have made it past the first cull, let alone into the bride's album. So that's another reason why you have to be really careful about who you're going to choose. But let's say price is no object, you found someone in your price range, they come highly recommended. Well, what's next? some people do it over the phone. I really recommend you meet the photographer in person, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. One is pure chemistry. The bride will probably spend more time with the photographer on her wedding day than with her own mother. And it sometimes happens that a bride absolutely hates the photographer. Not often, but if that happens, then the pictures are just not going to be as good. Second reason, and the most important one, is you cannot judge a photographer's work by their website. Because if an experienced photographer does, say, 200-300 weddings a year and has been doing it for about 10-15 years, they have thousands of pictures under their belt, and they're only going to put the best of the best on that site. Your wedding album is not going to look like that. Your wedding album is probably going to have a few good pictures, and the rest will be competent. They'll be well composed, they'll be in focus, they'll be fine. But they're not going to be on the bottom, on the cover of Modern Bride. Those are exceptional photographs. The second reason is that you really need to see photographers' work in person. I mean, if you have a winter wedding coming up, go and ask to see an album from a winter wedding, because every bride looks gorgeous in June in front of a sunset at the Herzliya Marina. But when they have to use artificial light and it's dark, the pictures are going to look totally different. So that's another reason why you want to see the work in person. And the third reason is those pictures on the website are not always taken by the photographer. If you're looking at a suspiciously cheap photographer, sometimes less than honest people put in photographs from, at best, workshops they have attended, which isn't even their work, really. It's really a workshop piece, with paid models, by the way, which is very different from working with a real bride. Or I've even seen stolen photographs on sites of wedding photographers. I was reviewing a guy's site not too long ago, and I thought, wait a second, there's something wrong here. The style is all over the place. And you can be sure that somebody who's only charging 3,000 shekels for a combined wedding and video package is not going to be hired for this enormous wedding in front of a Louisiana mansion, not even as a second or third shooter. And if you see a gorgeous bride, that she appears nowhere else, you never see her with her mother, you don't see her with her papa, you don't see her father making speeches, that's a pretty good sign that something fishy is going on. So you want to actually see an album, the real work of the photographer, and you want to hold it in your hand, and you want to get an idea, is the photographer mesudar, organized, professional? Can this person answer all my questions, and are they used to giving a contract and make sure all your questions are answered before you even part with a shekel of your deposit? So I hope these tips will help you in choosing a photographer, and God willing, it should be soon in your futures. Thank you.